Hello everyone, this is the Xjb145 from Hglrc. Comes with an F4 flight controller with an OSD, the ELF CCD camera, 28 amp ESC, the TX20 VTX, which is power switchable from 0 to 25, 100, 250 milliwatts. That white part is the LED display. Hglr Tech flame motors that are 1407 3600 kV, DYS 3045 props. It has a buzzer and LEDs, XT30 for your battery connection. It didn't come with this antenna, it came with that one. It has an HD cam mount. I broke the support. It comes with a blue battery strap. I swapped that out for my favorite. Have to wait for the toilet to finish flushing. People going to the bathroom. It weighs 130.21 grams. Bottom plate is a little over 3 millimeters. Top plate is 1.5 millimeters. Looks like the vertical carbon is 1.5 millimeters too. It comes with a brief instruction sheet and a box with modifications it'll fit in. I flew it on Tattoo 4S 650 milliamp batteries. Links are in the description. So I'm pretty familiar with these props. I've been flying these props quite a while, but not on a machine like this. I've actually been cutting down these props, and these props were, for a time, considered, you know, the best props that you could have, even on a micro at like 2.5 millimeter or 2.5 inch. We would cut these down to run them on micros that run 2 inch or 2.5 inch props. They're getting a little bit dated now. We've kind of moved away from bullnose. They seem to have gone to this flare type, which means we gain efficiency and possibly more thrust because you can run a higher pitch, because you don't have some of the air turbulence that you do with bullnose, and they're also quieter. But I do like the look. Blue. It's blue. I'm so glad they sent me the blue one to review. But on to the performance of the machine. I thought the camera did pretty well. I don't think it's quite as good as a run cam in the cloudy conditions like I show you, especially on the takeoff. We have complete cloud cover there, and to me, it just seemed a little dark still. It wasn't bad by any stretch, and we might be able to tweak that out with just using the OSD controller and changing a few of the settings. But that's something I noticed on default. A couple of other things, like I mentioned in the intro, I broke the cam mount, which goes down on here. It has a couple of little stubbies that just lock down, and then this nut is on the other side of the top piece. But I seared this off on a crash, and I had that crash because I broke the antenna, and I didn't know it on a flight, and then I plugged in the next battery, and it was fine on the ground nearby. I was zooming around, and then I hit the throttle and went up in the air, and it just about went. I couldn't see much. So I switched out the antenna mainly because this one didn't survive. And I think this one's a little short, to be honest, because when you do get the nose down, we're getting some interference depending upon your angle, and the reception is much better with a longer, plus this antenna is just a little bit better. I don't know that this one is cut at the right length for the frequency that we're trying to run, but you can see I had some prop strikes. So kind of the heat shrink is, you can't really see it, but down in here there's also some prop strikes. But so I added another zip tie and tried to reinforce it, then unfortunately it came undone, which is fixable, but I just decided to go the quick route. And so my video reception in the video that you see might be a little bit better than what you experience with the stock antenna. Just full disclosure there. As far as the flight experience, I really like this. I think this is a very traditional 3-inch. Unlike the MX3, the Sparrow, I think this one is very traditional in that it's light. Even though it's only like 12 or 13 grams lighter than the Sparrow, it flies like a much lighter quad. And I think these motors perform very, very well. I think I've got some motors, some 1407s that are 4,000 kVs on a lighter frame that only come in at 119 grams. And I'd be very curious. I want to do kind of a side-by-side comparison, see if I can fly the same track with the same sort of aggressiveness to see what I see. But this one flies very well. I think the thing it's going to kind of differentiate between if you want something like this or not, is the prop view, because we are a stretched X, which the premise behind that is that it's a little bit better for racing, so you get the nose down and you don't really use yaw that much because you're flying at such a vertical angle, and you just use the rudder in order to fly the course and maybe a little bit of pitch. And this tends to supposedly fly a little better. But with that stretched X design, we've got a lot of prop in view. And something else that you'll notice about that prop view, we could possibly alleviate this. I haven't tried it yet, but you'll notice that we have these two holes. We have where it's at now, and then where this other one is. I don't think we can move it up and have the camera angle that we currently have. Okay, so that part's not true. I actually took the time and I reworked this thing, moved my receiver back, and shifted the camera to the upper hole position, and this is a little sample of what it currently looks like. It's not the cleanest flight in the world. I was actually quite rushed, but we get to sample what the camera or the image looks like from the camera on a day where the lighting's actually pretty good. This is in the middle of the day here, and we just do a little flying around. And unfortunately, I wish I'd have had more time and produced a better flight on this day, because the lighting was so much better rather than being overcast and dreary. We still have all the scraggle from winter has set in. You can see that in the upper position with approximately the same camera angle that we had in the lower position, that we do still see the props, and we also see part of the top plate. So if you want to actually have less camera angle, because hopefully you can see how that's pretty much resting on the carbon fiber right there. That's the bottom of the PCB of the camera. In order to have less camera angle, and that's going to be important if you're just starting out, because you don't want to start out real fast forward flight. It may be difficult for you to manage. I would suggest moving it up to this spot and then just kind of leveling the camera angle out to say 15 or 20 degrees. That way you can see the ground most of the time. But the camera is actually wedged into those carbon fiber plates fairly snugly, so I don't think there's any risk of actually losing the camera or to getting out to prop view. I think even if both screws were to rattle loose, this thing's probably only going to come loose in a crash. Now, it's something to be aware of. It's not really a design flaw or anything, just something I thought I would point out. I do like the fact that they offered us some strain relief with a simple zip tie. Very simple solution. Very inexpensive, but at least if you're a first timer, you don't forget about this and then rip your pads off when you have a battery ejection. On the bottom here, I added this stuff. This was not stock. I used a battery gummy pad to give me some height over the screws mounting the flight controller stacked down, and then I used some Duralock on the top because that's how I like to just stick the battery on there, and then I can manage my strap a lot easier. I don't like to hold things on so much when I'm doing that. So Duralock is something that I use, but it does wear out over time, you know, especially as it shifts and you have those violent crashes. These little nubbies will get smashed down or torn off. So it's not a one-time deal. You do have to replenish this Duralock on one or both ends. You probably also noticed in the flight footage that I'm running Betaflight 3.2.2, and that is because I had originally put another XM receiver on here, and I had problems when I was trying to fly that with my favorite radio, which is a Devo 10 with a 4-in-1 module inside of it. I started having fail-safes, and I don't like flying with the QX7, the Taranis QX7. I just think it's too big for me. As a pincher, it doesn't work very well. So I went with a Spectrum receiver, and it is very tight inside here. The space that you have to work with is only as wide as the inside of this, and then the depth, as you can see, there's only that gap between the bottom and the top. Well, let's see, let's go around over here, and my Spectrum still has the connector on it. I'll probably change that out eventually. But so I've got the connector hanging off the front here, which would actually keep me from being able to try this top placement, which I think I will try to rework this because I'm interested in that top placement and a little less prop view, or prop in my view, because I do plan to try to run this with a HD camera of some sort. I'm still looking for a really good solution for micro HD cams. You know, running a GoPro on these things aren't really advantageous. You can get the Mini Mobius, which are pretty good, but they don't have the vertical field of view. They have a very wide field of view, not a very tall field of view. There's also the 808 keychain, which these are all, you know, okay. I'm looking for something that has the 140 to 150 degrees horizontally, so you get both vertical and width, and also weighs less than a pound. No, I'm kidding. Weighs less than a GoPro, though, because I think when you put a GoPro on any of these 3-inchers, you're definitely going to feel it. I do like the fact that if you've been around a while, you note that some of our frames come with little voids out here. I do like that they went ahead and put a little foot on the end here to keep us from pounding a whole lot of dirt and mud in here, and this open-end bell design. To me, it seems to allow us to clean stuff out better, and then not having a hole right here like some frames do, which kind of acts like a funnel for dirt and mud to just squirt straight up in there. I like that design. I also like the fact that even though they have an open bell, they have kind of a closed side to it on the wire side, offering more support for the wires. You may also want to know that you only have 3 screws. There's no ability to put a 4th in this frame unless you transfer everything off to a different frame. You might be wondering why I'm using this strap and not the one that's stock. The one that's stock just doesn't hold very well. I had a number of battery ejections with it, and once I went to this, the battery ejections just stopped. This texture here, it's not necessarily rubbery, but it's not slick nylon either. And obviously this came from airbladeuav.com, and I bought about 15 or 20 of these when they got these, and they have the metal buckle on here, which I feel allows me to get a tighter grip on the battery. And I always want the battery very snug because that's a big piece of the weight, and if it's shifting in flight, it's going to throw things off a little bit. And in the flight footage that you saw, my flight lines, I got blown off of them quite a bit just because of the wind. And the winds were pretty stiff. It wasn't an ideal day to fly a 3-inch, or really fly anything for that matter. I think the winds were probably 15 miles an hour, or gusts well beyond that. So when I would get way up in the air above the trees and everything, it would blow me. You saw it. It blew me way out over the yard. Then I had to circle around and come back. And I decided to show that just because it gives you an idea of flight conditions that will work with this. You know, other high maneuvers I was able to pull off flying around the top of the house. But when you're trying to do something that's, in my opinion, is fairly precise, where you're going vertical, so you're flying in like this, and you want it to go almost vertical, and then when you get to the top, you want to snap down so you get that float away experience. Instead of floating away, it was drifting back over the yard. But that's one of the things we have to put up with, and that's why those pilots that produce that really good footage, they'll pick much better days to fly. But unfortunately, this time of year where I live, we got a lot of winds. It's getting good days to fly where you can get a bunch of packs in are pretty rare right now because we're changing seasons and it's blowing in winter. I think if you're looking at this versus other 3-inchers, namely the Hglrc Sparrow, I would get this unless the prop in view is something that you just can't handle. The prop in view could bother some people quite a bit, but I think this flies better. I think it flies more like a traditional 3-inch, as I said in the beginning. I think the Hglrc MX3 Sparrow is a very fast, straight line machine. It's not all that agile. I am a little bit disappointed that this little support broke, but I recently got a 3D printer. It's still not set up, but maybe I can design a little 3D printed mount for my mini Mobius or something, and I can do some flying with an HD camera. I'm excited to try that out, but I got a lot to learn there. If you're looking for PIDs on 3.2.2, I'll put those on screen. I think they're pretty reasonable. I didn't have to do a lot of tweaking. 3.2.2, I'm pretty much Betaflight 3.2 is pretty good in general. I do think most of the time we need to tweak them, and as a pilot, we're looking for a certain sort of feel. You'll probably notice on those I use really high rates, or at least I've been told to use really high rates, and that's just how I like to fly. If you don't like really high rates, just turn them down a bit. If you like larger stick throws and more maybe deadband, so where it doesn't respond necessarily around the center so much, just type that in and set the flight controller to fly like you want it to fly. But those PIDs should get you in the air, and it may work on other versions of Betaflight just as well too. The primary reason I'm running 3.2.2 is when I had troubles with that receiver and I switched over to Spectrum, what I found was that the Betaflight that was flashed onto the board did not support the variable for set Spectrum satellite bind. That was when you type that command in, and I'll put it on the screen exactly what it is. I'm not saying it right. When you put that in, it comes up as invalid, so you have to actually flash the flight controller when you have that, because it is a valid variable. It's just that sometimes I've seen some boards come and they don't have that variable programmed, and I'm not aware of a way to work around that or to add that into the flight controller when it's not present via the flash. So I did that, and that remedied that problem, and I was able to bind my Spectrum satellite just fine. I'll put links to everything you see here, including the antenna, in the description down below, and the battery. I think a 650 is about the right size. 450, it kind of seemed like a short flight, and you get a lot of a low battery signals on your OSD whenever you'd hit the throttle hard. I think a 650 is just about right with this machine, and that's what you saw in flight. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please leave those in the section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.